Hi everyone, it's Chris. Today I have a card that I have made using craft cardstock and Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to be doing a little bit of painting with them, and I am using one of the new stamps from Unity Stamp Company's Kit of the Month. This kit is called Eyes of the Beholder, and today I am using the large floral rose image. I am using craft cardstock and my original MISTI, and I'm stamping with Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Now, I've removed the foam pad, actually my mouse pad, from my original MISTI to give me the depth that I need for these cling-mounted rubber stamps, and I inked it up several times. I didn't want to press too hard on the red rubber stamp because I didn't want to squish the image. So instead, I used my MISTI to ink it several times to give me that nice, crisp, dark image. And now I'm going to do some painting with the Distress Oxide inks. Now you can use a regular paintbrush. This is a flat brush. It is probably like a 6mm flat paintbrush, but my bristles are really soft, so it's a little difficult to get the color that I want from this. So I just wanted to show you a little tip that I've found. This is a very cheap makeup brush. This is an eyeliner brush or an eyebrow brush from e.l.f. and literally I got this brush at Walmart for like $1.99, and I love it for adding ink to my card fronts. So I am just using this very thin, very stiff, short bristled makeup brush to pick up the ink directly from my Distress Oxide ink pads. And then I just bring it over to my image. I'm using the Vintage Photo again, and I'm putting in my dark areas of my floral image right now. I am just kind of looking at this, deciding what areas are kind of in shadow, in shade, and that is where I'm applying the darker, the brown color of my ink. Now I'm using to clean my brush, I'm just using a microfiber towel and my Brutus Monroe squeaky cleaner. I just sprayed my towel and I'm just wiping my brush onto the towel, and it works really well for cleaning my brush. So I've added some of the darker color to that larger rose image, and now I'm going to add some antique linen and kind of temper the color on that smaller bud. This is just, I'm going to call it an opening rose bud, and so I kind of put a little bit of a base of antique linen down. And now I'm going to bring in that Vintage Photo just on the edges of the petals and kind of pull that a little bit towards that center of the flower. I'm putting a little bit more shadow towards the lower portion of that bud. And now I'm going to work on the leaves. I am going to be using a combination of bundled sage and peeled paint to kind of temper a very soft, kind of a watercolory look to the foliage of this. And just putting the bundled sage in very lightly, and then I'll bring in that peeled paint. And then again, I'm going to come back with the bundled sage, kind of temper the peeled paint. It got a little bit brighter than I was hoping. I wanted a really soft, muted color. So I'm literally just kind of smudging all of this paint in very lightly, very, just kind of a distressed watercolory look. And it works really well on the craft cardstock. And here I'm going back over that peel paint. It kind of grays that up and just kind of lightens it a little bit, blends those colors together. I love the Distress Oxides because they're really easy. They're really kind of creamy and easy to move around. So you can layer the colors and kind of smush them together and create your own color. Now I'm going to these little, I'm not even sure what kind of flowers they are, but they are going to be slightly purple. I'm using a very light coat of shaded lilac Distress Oxide ink. And I just pulled the color from the outside of the petals towards the center. And then I'm just kind of highlighting the flower centers with the squeezed lemonade, mostly on the lower half of that flower center. And now I'm bringing in some Gina K white pigment ink. And this is where I'm going to put the highlight. By adding the white, it really gives you the contrast of that dark vintage photo. So wherever I feel that the rose has the most highlight or the most, lit up area from my light source is where I'm adding the white pigment and just kind of smudging it back into the brown of the vintage photo. And you can see that the shape of the flower is really starting to appear by adding that white. And if you feel that you got too dark or you got a little bit of ink in areas that you didn't want, the white can help kind of temper that area and cover up some mistakes. And then you can always go back and re-ink again with the Distress Oxides, because they're both kind of have the pigment properties and they will work together. So now I'm going back up to that flower bud and adding some more white there. As the ink starts to soak into my craft cardstock a little bit, I decided that I wanted it a little bit stronger, so I went back and added just a bit more to my large flower. You have to be a little careful so you don't put your hand into the pigment, because it does take a little bit of time to dry, so you don't want to smudge it and smear it across your card front. And now I'm adding to those small flowers, more towards the center, a little bit of highlight to each of those petals as well. And now I want to add just a little bit more contrast and shadow, so I'm going back to the vintage photo and just darkening a few areas of that the rose. Anything that might be kind of underneath a cast shadow of another petal, I am bringing a little bit more dark color, the base of the flower, and just to give that more contrast, to really make that shape appear. And that's about it. I'll clean off my brush, and then I'm going to cut this down. I'm going to cut this down to a 4-inch square, and with a piece of kind of a matte paper that is just a really light violet color. Now I want to add my sentiment, and the sentiment that I chose is from a sentiment set from Unity Stamp Company called Special Wishes. And the one that I wanted was "You Are in My Thoughts on This Difficult Day." And I'm going to stamp that below my square image, my little panel here. And so I'm going to place this in my MISTI. I'm using my magnet to hold this in place. And I'm going to realign a little bit. I'm using the grid line of the lid just to adjust just a tiny bit, but I want to double check just to make sure that I've got it straight. It's hard to see through these red rubber stamps. You can't. So I like to test just to make sure that my sentiment is straight. So I just took a piece of acetate plastic. It's actually, it's called Duralar. And I just cut it down to fit inside my MISTI. And I stamped on that. And I saw that my alignment was really quite straight, so I'm just going to go for it. Again, I am stamping multiple times rather than pressing hard and smushing my letters. I want a nice crisp image, so I believe I inked it up 5 times just to get that nice dark color. And now it's just assembly. Using the Brutus Monroe liquid glue to adhere my panel to my matte square, and then to my A2 top fold card base. I can see that I need to refill my tiny little bottle. I love this little bottle of glue. It's so handy. And then I just refill it from a larger one. So as I glue this together, I've decided that I want to add some twine, just a little bit more interest. So I'm going to bring in some of this rustic jute twine. And I'll show you a little trick that I learned from my friend Marcy. So I'm going to wrap several times around my card front and right between my image and my sentiment. And I've never been a very good bow tire. I just don't have that coordination. Plus I have these long nails, so it's really hard for me to tie bows. So when I saw her trick for tying this, I thought that is absolutely genius. So I'm just going to show you her little trick that she showed me. She used one of the creative corners, the little pointy part of that, to hold that piece of twine down. When you tie that first knot, that one's easy, but getting the second one to tie nice and tightly is near impossible for me. So by using the point of that creative corner and the magnets to hold it down, it was just a genius idea. So I thought I'd share it again with you. And even then, I still had to tie my bow a second time because I still am not very good at this. So I'm just going to snip these off. I've tied my loops about an inch each, not quite an inch. Trim that down, and there is my finished card. Thanks for watching.